Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Hazel Kenyon, and I'm the Commercial Director at NielsenIQ BookData, and I'm here today to share with you some insights on the book markets in 2025. So this session is all about uncovering key trends that we measure in our different territories, looking at the state of play of growth in different territories, looking at the different genre trends and how they vary across different regions, and also considering the impact of global economic factors on some of the book markets. But before I start, I want to review the data sources that I'm going to be using in the talk today. So there's two key elements to the data I'm going to use today. The first is bibliographic data, and the second is sales data, and both of which are underpinned by the ISBN. Now, we're in a great place to talk about the ISBN because NielsenIQ BookData hosts the ISBN agency in the UK and Ireland. So we have a great amount of expertise in this unique identifier that provides the oil to keep the data cogs turning in the book supply chain. So the first thing is metadata. So we are aggregators and custodians of metadata from over 60,000 content creators and publishers worldwide. And they provide that data to us, and then we enrich it. And we make sure that it's complete and it's accurate. We make sure that the elements such as table of contents and keywords, the classifications are correct, as well as the key elements such as price and availability. And then we cascade that data out to many different users around the world who want to use our data. And we do focus on English language titles and product information, but we do also have a growing amount of other foreign language titles in our database as well. And so once we've cascaded that data around, we also then measure book sales, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. So we count print book sales across our various territories around the globe, again, underpinned by the ISBN. And we count the print book sales from a number of different channels. The first one being online retailer. So online retail, as we know, across the last 10 to 20 years has grown hugely in many of the territories. But I think we've got to a point now where there's a sort of fair balance in each of the territories we cover, and it's just become part of the new normal. They obviously offer challenges to bricks and mortar shops because of the flexibility and range they can offer, and that also follows through in terms of the pricing they can offer as well, making it very attractive for consumers. The other channel we cover are physical bookshops, bricks and mortar shops, and this is both chains, large and small, and also independent shops. And these really are a crucial element to any book buying ecosystem. They offer a huge amount of value add for the consumer when buying a book, as well as the expertise they have in-house. They're generally lovely places to go to, and our research does show that consumers really value enjoying the experience of buying a book, and often you can get coffee and cake, which is also very nice. So these really are a crucial element to the high street, and actually there was research done by the UK's Booksellers Association a few years ago that showed that having a bookshop in your high street or in your area actually has a halo effect, and it uplifts the community and the other shops around it. And that's because of this multi-dimensional element of book buying that they offer. And then we also count combination stores, mixed multiple stores. So shops that do not traditionally sell books, but also have books in their stock as well, such as supermarkets, gift shops. And these are really convenient for the consumer because that is the book going to where the consumer is. And obviously can really help sometimes with that impulse purchase or aid in discoverability. So we count sales from all of these channels in our different territories. The other element to my talk today is also our global expertise. We have our analysts working in each of the territories that I'm about to discuss today. And they know the book markets. They know the publishers, they know the retailers, they know the books, they know the titles, they know the consumers. And this expertise is what allows me to stand here today and talk to you with authority about these book markets. And we'll see some little snippets of expertise coming through as I talk. And so the countries that we cover are listed on the screen. And so our panel coverage varies. So first of all, we have our oldest panels. So those panels where we've been tracking book markets for over 20 years, where we have well into 90% coverage of those print book sales. We're pretty much counting every sale done in that country. We then have those territories such as India, where there's a more fragmented book buying experience with other routes to market. Consumers can buy books, and it's not as easy for us to capture those electronic point of sales transactions. And so the coverages are slightly lower. And then we have our newest territories where we're still building up the retail panel of shops contributing to the sales measure. And our experts tell us that on a weekly basis, our data can collect over 30 million lines of transactional data. So it really is quite big data that we're collecting here. And so before I talk about the state of play for 2025, and we're looking at the first 8 months of the year to the end of August, I wanted to take us back to what things looked like 1 year ago, 2024, cast your mind back. And so what were we saying at this point? Well, first of all, our press release was released, and what we said was that global book markets are shaped by strong fiction, declining non-fiction, and slower price increases. And at this point, what we see is these territories in volume growth and these territories in value growth. And I like volume growth because it really starts telling us that people are buying more books, and the value growth is not just some element of what's happening with the pricing. And so what we can see is that we've got 10 markets out of 14 showing market shrinkage. Particularly tough markets in Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa, and Belgium. And we are seeing non-fiction struggling, but what we're seeing is fiction being buoyed at this point by TikTok and all of the books that you can discover on this platform, helping boost sales across a number of different genres. So that was 2024 to August. So then what about the end of the year? We again released a press release looking at the full year of data. And now we're including Christmas, which is a key book buying time. Has that changed? Well, actually, our press release says pretty much the same thing. We're still seeing non-fiction struggling, prices still rising, fiction still doing well. But now we're seeing an extra territory in terms of volume sales. But what we're seeing is just sort of movement between territories flipping between volume and value growth or not. So there's quite a lot of turmoil still going on at this point. And having a look at the end of the market, Brazil managing to build on the value growth to having volume growth. India and Mexico both remaining really, really strong. The Netherlands now new to value growth. And we did see children's book sales growing in terms of value terms in 9 of the territories, but very much driven by pricing. So here we are. I'm looking at the data to the end of August 2025, and what do we see at this point? Well, now we're showing volume growth, showing in more territories, which I feel is quite encouraging. We're also seeing growth in value across a number of different territories. And actually, it's also worth pointing out, for those markets in decline, of which there still are some, that decline is more muted. And what we're seeing is the average decline sitting about minus 2.4% compared with minus 3.8% compared to this time last year. And so we see more territories in volume growth. Brazil and India are over 10%, well into double digits, greater than that, in fact. And we are seeing multiple categories in growth within non-fiction, fiction, and children's as well. Being helped driven by trends, which I am going to talk in a bit more detail about, crime and thriller, romantasy, that won't be the last time I say that word today, children's fiction, and comic strips. And our experts tell us that actually these figures are showing that maybe there's some positivity starting to take root and things are going to start to grow a bit. Going to be optimistic. So I want to give a quick trip around the world, just looking at a few of our countries, because there's too many for my slot to talk about today. But starting with the UK, and what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to show some titles which are indicative of the genres that we see growing. It's not just all about those titles. So the UK, first of all, this is a market that is struggling, down 2.6% in volume, down 0.4% in value. and we can't seem to sort of get ourselves out into value growth. And what we're seeing is good growth in young adult fiction, helped in part by the new Suzanne Collins title, the prequel to the Hunger Games, and we saw this title doing well globally, as we did with her other Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So young adult fiction, sort of dystopic book, so that's helping drive growth of 6% in terms of volume in young adult fiction. What we also see is sci-fi and fantasy, and we have Rebecca Yarros's title on here. Again, that won't be the first time her title appears on a slide. Globally, has done incredibly well. Sarah J. Maas with her Court of Thorn and Roses series books also still doing particularly well. But what we also see in the UK is a number of ISBNs in sci-fi and fantasy growing at 5% increase year on year. Now that's quite unusual for a category where there's over 250,000 ISBNs selling in that category. So we're seeing that growth in the number of ISBNs. We also see a 7% growth in the number of ISBNs in the romance category as well, although as a category that's down in terms of volume sales. We also see modest growth in picture books, and that's helped by World Book Day titles. In the UK, you can exchange a voucher for a free book. School children are given this voucher so they can get a free book. And also with some classic picture books, you'll all recognise, hopefully, Eric Carle's A Very Hungry Caterpillar, helping keep that category in growth. Children's non-fiction, cosy colouring. I don't understand it myself, but cosy colouring is a thing, and it's something that has been popular in many different territories, but that's helping drive growth in children's non-fiction. And then also children's comic strip fiction and graphic novels. So these books have been doing very well, sort of a more graphical version of fiction that we're seeing do well. And actually what's good is these books are particularly popular amongst boys. And also 1 in 5 girls say they like this genre. And actually our experts tell us from research we've got that this genre appears to children in a segment that we've identified as potentials, which is they are light readers, however they have really positive sentiments towards books, hence potentials. So this could be a very positive way of getting children engaged in reading, and it is a positive way. So now if we have a look at India, so this is a territory that's doing hugely well, 27% growth in volume, 29% growth in value. The top seller from Prajakta Kohli, Too Good to Be True. She's an online influencer, and India loves fiction. So this fiction book, together with a social media star, has actually really sort of the intersection of two successful things, has ended up with her having a best-selling book at the top of the charts, to the end of August selling 122,000 units. We also see this book Khadija here, written in Malayalam, which is one of 12 books in the top 100 titles in India, which are not in English. But overall, India doing well in terms of fiction sales. We also see personal development doing well in India, usually the case, and very backlist driven. 2 very backlist titles, The Atomic Habits from James Clear and The Psychology of Money. But we do have a frontlist title doing well, which is Build an Epic Career, which was published at the beginning of the year. It's quite unusual, but that category, or that helping drive that category growth. And our experts tell us, actually, that India's bestsellers are traditionally very backlist driven, with only 20 titles out of the top 100 being published in year, compared with over half titles in the UK, for example. So now having a look at Australia, this is a market that's having modest growth in both volume and value terms at the moment. So we see more sci-fi and romantasy. This book in particular selling 225,000 units to the end of August in Australia. So Rebecca Yarros, again, doing very well with this romantasy theme. And overall, her Fourth Wing titles selling well over 500,000 sales year to date in Australia, so helping drive the market there. We also see picture books doing well with an 11% growth. And this Truck Cat book was actually part of the National Simultaneous Story Time, initiative from the Australian Library and Information Association. So that seems like a really positive thing, that we have a book here that is part about reading and libraries, and children are really getting engaged with it enough to then go and buy it. And obviously that's what we need. We need a nation of readers in order to help drive our book markets. We also see novelty and activity doing well in Australia, and there are pockets of growth in cookery, where actually driven by bestsellers from local Australian authors who are helping having success in this particular category. And then again, we've got the cosy colouring. And our experts tell us that actually 2025 has seen a resurgence of colouring books with titles with cosy, cute, calm and sweet being the essential themes this time around. So that all feels very nice. And so now, having a look at some non-English language territories that we have, are the trends the same? Well, first of all, having a look at France, our biggest book market that we track, with to the end of August, 186 million units, actually is a market down slightly in terms of volume and value, as are many of the different categories at the top. But what we are seeing is really good growth in crime and thriller, being help driven by Frida McFadden, who actually took the top 5 slots in this territory, the bestsellers. So last year there was a little bit more variation in the bestsellers in France, with Joel Dicker, a Swiss author, and Guillaume Musso, a French author. But Frida McFadden has the crown this year in France. And then we do see, again, pockets of growth in one of the cookery categories, and the best-selling book there is a Ninja air fryer book, which is my air fryer, so I'm quite interested in getting that, if I can get the translated version. And so now, having a look at our largest territory we track in Latin America, a market worth 330 million euros year-to-date to August, and that's Brazil. And Brazil, again, we're seeing cosy colouring. So the top 2 books selling in this country, driving category growth of 500%, have brought in over 1 million units. Momo, the little dog, is obviously resonating with the Brazilian authors really well. We're also seeing children's fiction growing, and we're seeing 9% growth in terms of volume and 14% growth in terms of value. And one of the top titles there is this book here, which is a cross between The Office and Once Upon a Time. So I'm interested in reading that. So children's fiction doing well, manga doing well. We're also seeing, again, sci-fi, fantasy, romantasy. Rebecca Yarros doing well, although actually being outsold still by Colleen Hoover and Matt Haig, who were doing well in other territories sort of a year or so ago. So whether there's sort of just a bit of a lag there. And then also young adult fiction, this Lynn Pater translated title here, actually a bit more romance and comedy rather than that romantasy. So the young adult fiction there taking a slightly different direction to some of the other territories. So we also have personal development, The Courage Not to Please, this self-improvement book, showing globally we do see trends for self-improvement, self-development books, and again, a backlist title. But in Brazil, I mean, there's more crime thriller, children's non-fiction, religion, but I'm just going to run out of time, but doing great, Brazil. And so now, just moving on from looking at those territory trends, just to have a look at average selling prices. Prices are rising, values are increasing, what's happening? So first of all, having a look at the average selling price that we measure and comparing it with the average selling price for these different countries we measured this time a year ago, we can see that we're seeing growth in those ASPs across all of our territories except New Zealand, where we're seeing quite heavy discounting driving that down. If we now overlay on top of this, those territories, and the average selling price increase is 1.6%, which actually, when we saw this last year, was 2.4%. So the average selling price is increasing, but not as much as it did last time. Again, the volume decreasing, but not as much as it did last time. So things eking in the right direction, hopefully. So if we overlay on here those territories where we see value decreases to see if there's some correlation, Well, we see increasing average selling prices and not managing to drag certain countries into value growth, despite being sort of plus 4% in the Netherlands. It's having more of an impact in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. But then if we have a look at volume, and again, colour those bars for the countries where we're seeing volume decreases, we can see it's the same as the value decreases, but a few more. And increasing prices putting consumers off buying books and reducing those volumes? Well, potentially that could be the case in what we're seeing in Europe. And so the other thing is to have a look at average selling prices we're measuring compared to average selling prices and the impact with inflation. So this is our change year on year in the average selling price. But what if we now just look at the average selling price that it would be if it had only grown due to inflation and compare that? And actually now we see that average selling prices for many countries are actually lagging behind what we're seeing in terms of inflationary growth. So they are relatively more affordable or less expensive than other products and other items. And actually, our experts tell us at this point that book prices can be decreased if there's a lot of competition, especially with certain channels being able to discount more heavily, and also consumers are used to a price for a book. It's very hard to change the value, even though we all know they're worth a lot. And so then finally, I just wanted to have a look at average selling price. We're talking average selling prices, and that's expensive, or that might not be expensive, but just wanted to have a look at comparing it to how affordable it is for consumers in these different countries. So I started by just converting all the average selling prices into euros. So we can see that in Belgium, we have, the most expensive books relatively. It's sort of, 16 euros, going all the way down to India, where you can see it sort of being a lower price book. But now what if we were to overlay the average hourly wage for a book? Now, I'm going to hold my hands up. I'm using a very blunt instrument to have a look at something that is very nuanced. And the average wage can vary hugely within a country, depending on a rural or an urban area. But this really was just sort of to give an indication. And so what I did, have a look at the average hourly wage. And we now see there are countries where to buy a book is going to cost you more than you've earned in an hour. And that suddenly changes how luxurious a book seems. I'm in a lucky position where I can go and buy a book and not really think about it, but that is not the case for everybody. So when we think about what's happening in different countries, we also have to think about, well, what are the consumers here facing when they go to buy a book? How much are they having to dig into their pocket for this? So having a look at this, we can see that there are a number of territories where you are looking at a book costing more than the average hourly wage, but a lot of those territories are the ones we're seeing in volume growth. So really, these are nations of really keen book buyers that see books as a luxury item, yet will still pay out for them. And so, in summary, really, we can see there is positive volume growth in more territories. It feels like we're going in the right direction. We also see in terms of trends, there's always going to be global trends, the romanticy, a personal development, self-improvement, but we also see these pockets of local trends, locally produced food and drink books, local authors writing fiction that really resonate with the local markets. And then also, it's worth saying that books are still quite expensive for a lot of people. And we have to remember that when we think about marketing. But we are still seeing a lot of these countries buying books in more numbers and volume growth's increasing. So it feels a bit more positive. Thank you very much.